Well, the panel is dedicated to the perspectives, the role of civil society in the Europeanization process. And as we've heard already today, there's no denying that civil society is integral, important to the process of Europeanization, if not for its overall sustainability as well. So it's vital importance. But at the same time, sometimes it's disregarded, sidestepped, manipulated. And I don't think we really have many instances of best practice on how to bring civil society into positive dialogue as an equal partner with governments and authorities. So we'll hear from the speakers today about that. Just very, very briefly, one of the hats that I'm wearing today is of the editor of the Eastern Partnership Forum's Index, which is going to be released, published next month. It's a publication which looks at 14 different sectors in the Europeanization process of all six Eastern Partnership countries across 14 different sectors. And just very briefly, the results are very, very positive for Ukraine and Moldova on all the key areas of governance, rule of law, democracy, elections. Both countries score very well. And I can answer some questions about that later if you so wish. But I'm going to turn to our two speakers. We have Sergei Gerashimchuk and Dmytro Shulga, who's kindly stepped in a short kind of change to the program. I'll hand over to Sergei first, and he's going to be covering a chapter that he wrote for the Index, looking at Ukraine's civil society perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kerry. Thank you for this introduction and for our joint efforts in writing the chapter and trying to analyze the results of the index. Each time I was starting my presentations on Eastern Partnership, I was starting them with a quote from the Game of Thrones. And it was the motto of the Greyjoy family. Eastern Partnership is like that motto. What is dead may never die. And ironically, I was starting with that without the continuation of this motto. But there is one. It raises harder and stronger, which is more or less true for the Eastern Partnership, because what we can observe now is sort of evolution of Eastern Partnership, not necessarily with the same essence, but obviously with the same reforms, which are highlighted both in the Eastern Partnership documents and, as we saw it, in the steps or demands, whatever you call it, suggested by the European Commission on the eve of opening the negotiation talks, mainly the precondition for opening the negotiation talks. And our key finding in the chapter was that all these recommendations are somehow linked to Eastern Partnership priorities. And what we did in the chapter, we even showed this link, reflected how the recommendations of the European Commission are in line with the thematic areas of the Eastern Partnership Index, which is focused on analyzing the progress of Eastern Partnership countries. And what we did in the chapter, we tried to analyze all these 7 steps and from the perspective of their implementation, from the perspective of civil society's assessment of this implementation. And in order to keep you awake, I will try to stop on each of them with a few comments, because indeed that was an amazing story which combined the features of the thriller, of the fairy tale, of different genres, and it was really entertaining, intellectually entertaining to follow the progress and to see how many efforts were invested into gaining the result. So I will probably start with them one by one, and the first critical condition cited in the European Commission opinion, it was the issue of the judicial independence and justice. And as I've told you, it coincides with the thematic area of the Eastern Partnership Index, which is independent judiciary. We try to ask the experts in the field how do they assess the progress in this field, in particular with the focus on the Constitutional Court and the judges' recruitment. And the story was quite dramatic in Ukraine because there was a huge discussion how to keep the integrity of the Constitutional Court judges, and how to make the process as transparent as possible and as open to all willing to observe as possible. And indeed, civil society did a huge job, in particular our colleagues who are also participants of the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum, the Euro Foundation, which was following all the developments. And indeed, there was this inertia of the state machine which didn't want to make significant progress, which is clear. I mean, the politicians always want to have their influence on all sectors, which is true not only for Ukraine, but also for the other Eastern Partnership countries, and even for some European member states where the issue of constitutional courts still remains relevant. And afterwards, there was a progress, and at least now we have a procedure for clear and transparent recruitment of the Constitutional Court judges. However, the experts say that the progress is moderate, just because we have the procedure, but we never tried it. And unless we try it on ground, unless we see how the Constitutional Court judges are elected, we won't be sure that the reform is completed. The same was true with experts who are in charge of checking the credibility and integrity of the judges in Ukraine. And again, here was quite a detective story with all these attempts to change the legislation, and with the statements of certain representatives of the ruling party in the parliament who were objecting the high influence of the foreigners on the process. And there were even attempts to register alternative bills which could have prevented foreigners from having a decisive say in the process of the selection. But again, here the fairy tale has a happy end, and basically the ideas reflected in the opinions of the civil society leaders, experts in the field, they won, of course, with the support of the EU. And here we have to keep in mind that civil society efforts matter, but what matters more is when they are accompanied with the EU's pressure on the countries. Then there was quite a good progress in the field of anti-corruption, and that's a paradox, because at the previous sessions we were talking about the issue of corruption in Ukraine and the issue of Ukraine's perception as a corrupted country. But indeed, the progress in the field of at least creating the institutional frame for fighting corruption, there was a significant progress. Although there were a lot of complaints during the process of the selection of NABU and SAP leadership and staff. However, the general assessment is okay, and the experts also agree that there was a substantial progress in this regard. Moving further, there was the issue of critical conditions. The critical condition cited in the European Commission opinion was the law enforcement sector reform, and it correlates with the Eastern Partnership Index thematic area independent judiciary. And here, the main events took place already after submission of my paper. And that was the discussion about so-called PEPs, politically exposed persons. And there was a real political tsunami here in Ukraine with a law, with a respective law, because it was criticized both by the representatives of the ruling party and by the representatives of the opposition. And it was mainly due to the pressure of the EU institutions that the law was passed. And the most tricky part of the law is the term when the politically exposed persons are being monitored. Because according to the law, which was already signed by the president, it's a long-life monitoring. Whereas there was a lot of criticism on that issue here in Ukraine. And the key complaint is that it tackles not only the PEPs, but also their families. And due to the bank system approach, it really creates problem even for those who have nothing to do with corruption, but they just are rejected by the banks because the banks do not want to deal with the guys who potentially can cause troubles to the banks. So there is still a discussion on the future of the law. So far, the recommendation was more or less complete, but I wouldn't exclude that there will be petitions to the Constitutional Court, which will hopefully be independent, to raise the issue if it corresponds with the Constitution of Ukraine. Then moving forward, there was the issue of de-oligarchization. And indeed, even prior to the big war, the issue of de-oligarchization was on the top agenda of President Zelensky. Basically, he did his campaign focusing on this fighting oligarchs. And even prior to February 24, 2022, he announced his will to have a special law on de-oligarchization, which defines oligarchs and defines the way to prevent them from influence. And if we are talking about the progress in this field, then again, paradoxically, but we are full of paradox in this war. The war triggered the oligarchization per se, because most of the oligarchs lost most of their assets. And basically speaking, those who used to be tycoons like Mr. Akhmetov, Mr. Kolomoisky, now are in quite a different position. And I doubt that anybody now will call Mr. Kolomoisky an oligarch, since he doesn't have an influence. Moreover, he is arrested. Same true with Mr. Akhmetov, who just lost most of his assets in metallurgy and sold his media assets. So the government decided that the register of the oligarchs will be published after the martial law. However, nobody is sure if there's going to be anybody on the list by that time. However, my colleagues in the sector still believe that there is a limited progress in this regard, but here it's the issue to be discussed. Because, as I told you, there is an evidence that the level of oligarchs' influence and impact on the process of decision-making is getting much, much lower in comparison to the few years ago. The issue of media freedom, it's the issue where the European Commission was talking mostly about technical aspects, about bringing the Ukrainian legislation in compliance with the European directives, and here the progress is clear. However, if we take the issue of media freedom in a more generalized way, then we have to face the problem that the country with a martial law cannot provide all the opportunities for media freedom, and certainly there are some limitations. And there are a lot of complaints from the opposition who believes that their media rights are limited by the teleton that Ukraine is having at the moment, starting from February last year. So there are many issues in media freedom that are disputable. So we can discuss and we can try to find common denominators. And my colleagues believe that the progress is exemplary, but it's only about bringing the legislation in compliance with the directives. And last but not least, there was the issue of human rights and minority rights, which was brought on the agenda. And here my colleagues assessed it as a substantial progress, and I have to admit that indeed we've made many amendments to the legislation, and but the problem is really protracted. The problem which emerged back in 2017 with the law on education and Article 7 that triggered serious concerns of a few of our neighboring states, and that caused real troubles with Hungary, which started blocking the Ukraine NATO Commission, and with other complications that went public. There is a progress, though, and even in the last few years, Ukraine has passed a new legislation on national minorities communities, and Ukraine has adopted a new national program called Unity in Variety. However, before we assess it as a substantial and long-standing progress, we have to see how the laws are implemented and how bylaws are being elaborated and implemented to make sure that the minority rights are preserved here in Ukraine. So, generalizing and wrapping up with my presentation, I have to admit that first, the ideas of Eastern Partnership reforms are still alive, although they have gained a new form of the EU's recommendation. Second, in many cases, there was a significant progress. And if I refer to another project that we implemented, the Tracker project, Eastern Partnership Tracker project, we can also notice that the acceleration of the efforts to implement the reform was obviously the reaction to the EU's proposals and to the EU's promises, or sometimes to the EU's pressure. So the more EU was pressing, the faster the authorities were moving. Of course, the EU was not alone in its pressure, and it had good background information from the civil society organizations who supported these efforts. And third, I think that whatever we call the neighborhood of the EU, whether we call it Eastern Partnership or candidate states belt or whatever, what will remain crucial is not only creation of the frameworks, legislative, normative, but also the implementation. And the implementation should be monitored. And here, civil society organizations, NGOs, experts are the best allies of the EU. Thank you.
I'm glad that you mentioned that issue to do with having the law, but the implementation and the monitoring. And it's often just ticking the box, having the law, and there's obviously a whole lot of work to do after that. And we'll hopefully come back to that. But let me hand over to Dimitro, who's going to talk more critically about Eastern Partnership. Toby.
Is it working? Oh, okay. Hello, everyone. I was not preparing really for this panel, and when the organizers asked me to talk about Eastern Partnership, my first question was to myself, what I'm going to talk about? Is there actually something to talk? And I decided to be really a bit kind of provocative, maybe, to share with you some reflections, observations, and questions. Maybe not fully kind of coherent vision, but kind of really rather debating questions and reflections. And please counter me if you think I'm not correct in some of the theses. So just to recall, so the Eastern Partnership, how it was designed, how it was created in 2008, 2009, what was the goal, what was politicalization, economic integration, basically extension of what was the EU offer to Ukraine to other 5 countries. How it evolved over time, 2013, basically Russia made it geopolitical, because before that it was very technical exercise rather. But Russia made it geopolitical, made it confrontational, and there was a clear choice who opted for EU path, who basically refused the initial EU offer. So since then, actually, the goal of the Eastern Partnership was evolved, and now it's just strengthening and deepening political and economic ties. This is the official goal according to the websites of the EU institutions right now. What do we have now? I mean, Ukraine wasn't. I mean, it's known that Ukraine was always kind of not very enthusiastic about Eastern Partnership for the objective reason. I think a bit little added value compared to other countries. But I think what I hear now is actually, I mean, I really asking question: is there something left from it? I mean, I just heard from Brussels that last time I heard something about Eastern Partnership from Brussels. I heard that there was no platform on the intergovernmental level met since a year or two, maybe already. Please correct me if this is not correct information. Last meeting of the ministers I saw in December last year. Without much in Ukraine, EU joint summit declaration, the last one, point 31, almost the last one. The last one only 32 about the European political community. The 31 is about Eastern Partnership with just one sentence, mentioning issues of resilience, security, energy security, and hybrid threats. That's basically it. In one sentence. 31 after all more important things. Yeah, I mean, I understand that for as over the years, as we discussed, I understood that for European Commission, of course, it was very useful to have Eastern Partnership as something which could be a kind of reference for programmatic issues. Basically, there was very practical need for EU institutions to programmatize funds for countries, and European Commission used this framework of the Eastern Partnership to do it. So that was very kind of bureaucratically practical thing why we needed such a framework. Now we discuss funds from the European Union without any reference to Eastern Partnership. It's facility, it's recovery of Ukraine, it's very specific issues of resilience during wartime. So it's not referenced really to the Eastern Partnership as such. But even if we could look at some of the other issues which we were talking about in previous times, and I think proved very kind of over time, we see how it proved whether this criticism was right one or not right one. Well, that it was like in security dimension. It was very kind of usual thesis. Ukrainians always were talking about it, Georgians as well. Eastern Partnerships like in security dimension. Usual reply to that from Brussels was, you want security, go to NATO. You want to talk security, go to NATO. European Union is not about security. Oh, really? Now we really, I mean, it is, definitely is. We were talking so much about regional cooperation, confidence building measures. We've spent so much time. I was witnessing some of the intergovernmental expert panels together with Azerbaijanis and Armenians on some totally unrelated issues, but they were fighting each other. It was consuming so much time. Did we contribute to confidence building between Armenia and Azerbaijan, spending so much time in regional meetings on Eastern Partnership on many issues, and spending so much time hearing these quarrels between Armenians and Azerbaijanis? It really contributed to the peace and security in the South Caucasus. When recent wars escalated, European Union basically seems like had no leverage at all. With having Eastern Partnership, with having relationships, so much important. But what was the relationship? What was the role of the EU to manage the crisis? Deliverables. Again, I mean, to me, again, I appreciate really. I mean, I understand that Eastern Partnership. Basically, in the EU, we had Eastern Partnerships was always advocated by our friends, and that's why kind of we are always kind of having like this dilemma, like we were not really satisfied with this in partnership, but we understood that it's better not to really criticize it so much, because we understood that it undermines the friends of Ukraine and other countries inside, because other countries, there were other people who were just basically criticizing this partnership as well within the EU, saying that basically it's not important, it's not, we don't need to invest in it, and so on and so forth. So that created kind of difficulties for us to discuss. But again, deliverables, I think deliverables were, in many cases, were very, very nice, very good. I mean, interesting benchmarking exercise, really how to programmatize funds to have some sort of understanding of what should be the outcomes of it, not only outputs. And in some cases more relevant, in some cases maybe not really very much. I don't know whether it really had a very big sustainable impact of investing into Ukrainian SMEs in local currency over time, and then security crisis and economy down, and is it sustainable? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen whether there was any. I don't know if it's possible to make some sort of assessment of how sustainable this impact could be on SMEs. I mean, if there is no security, what sort of economic development? What sort of SMEs? There is no security. That's fundamental. Flagship projects, by the way, as well. Very interesting. I mean, in the last revision of the Eastern Partnership, with so many talks about regional cooperation, flagship projects, there was no cross-border flagship project at all. I was really surprised very much because there were top 5 projects for each country, some sort of other also kind of flagship projects, but no cross-border, even between Ukraine and Moldova, the most easy, I think. But in 2014, last year, we suddenly managed to have a direct line between Kiev and Chisinau railway. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I understood that it was done without EU money. It was done just by national resources. So when there was a demand, when there was kind of really urgency, we were able to do it. I don't know why it was not done before with EU support. Not even dreaming about Black Sea connectivity, on which I maybe will come a bit later. So I think kind of now when we have this situation when, I don't know, frankly speaking, if there is, I mean, last time I heard some kind of very informal conversation with a friend from Brussels, and she told me, you know, my feeling is that Eastern Partnership is basically slowly dying. And kind of that's sort of, although there is in Brussels said there are kind of different perspectives, and maybe we need to extend it to Central Asia, and there will come to other items to discuss. I don't know, but my thinking now is that Eastern Partnership was creation of the situation. I mean, the whole item was created in 2008, 2009. Situation completely changed. Let's not talk about Eastern Partnership. We need to, I mean, in order to answer the question what to do about Eastern Partnership, what to do with Eastern Partnership, we need to answer basic questions. What needs to be done with the EU Eastern policy? And to readdress the very other broader questions, the very fundamental questions. Well, first of all, what is the policy on Russia? What is Russia to European Union? It is what? Russia basically says that they are fighting the West in Ukraine. They don't want European unity. They perceive the West being basically directed by the US, and European Union is basically kind of useful for US to keep European governments, European countries kind of under this Western American umbrella, Pax Americana. And this is something what they want to challenge. This is something that what they want to destroy. They want to destroy basically the post-Cold War order in Europe. What does it mean for European Union policy on Russia? I mean, we so much discussing now expectations of the enlargement reports. Why don't we discuss expectations from the 12th sanctions package? Long overdue. And so far, kind of the insights from Brussels is that basically Americans recently sanctioned Arctic LNG 2 project of Russian. European Union does not want to do it. There are member states who are opposing it. Spain, Belgium, major buyers. France is Total is a major investor, joint venture with the Russian company, doing gas, paying taxes to Russian government, fighting in Ukraine, killing Ukrainians, to whom French government supplies weapons to defend themselves. I mean, it's totally. I mean, most of Western companies have not withdrawn from Russian market. By the way, I know one of these companies, which stays in the Russian market and stays also in the Ukrainian market. When Ukrainians asked why so, they said, no, there was a scandal that recently this company was blacklisted by Ukrainian government anti-corruption agency as a sponsor of aggression, sponsor of the war. And this company was kind of saying to Ukrainian employees who were also asking these questions, it was done by Ukrainian government just to shift the attention from Ukrainian government's scandals with corruption. Very well. I mean, very good. Is it really, I mean, isn't there kind of sort of corruption in here? I mean, the whole kind of fundamental corruption, I don't know how to call it, grant corruption, political corruption, international political corruption, but companies standing in the Russian market and providing very critical support to Russia with funds, with taxes, with technologies, with supplies. And this, okay, even if we don't look at the moral side of it, it basically undermines the goals of the European Union in supporting Ukraine to defend themselves and to defend the eastern flank of Europe in this case. And ultimately, I think it's basically about what is the European Union as an international actor. Broadly speaking, what is the state? What is the stance in the world? What is the ability to play a role in conflicts around Europe? Not only here, but also let's look at Israeli-Palestine conflict or other conflicts in the neighborhood. What is the goal with Russia? With whom do we want to engage with Russians? With whom to engage there? Do we look only at so-called liberal Russian opposition, or we also hear the voices of those people who say that they are repressed, the indigenous people of Russian Federation who are oppressed and say that Russian Federation need to be decolonized? What do we want to do with Belarus? What is the goal of European Union's policy to Belarus? Black Sea region, security in the Black Sea, is there a role for European Union? Connectivity. My dream, of course, is longer term to really have a connectivity, kind of this Eastern Partnership. I think what should be about connectivity through Black Sea from Ukraine to South Caucasus, to Georgian ports and further. That could be a good project, kind of ideally, but now in such situation, of course, it could be realized only after we take Crimea back and demilitarize the Russian Black Sea Fleet. So many questions, so many maybe provocative statements, so please contradict me, and we have, I think, interesting debate. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I think it is really fruitful to open that bigger debate, because if 2 or 3 countries do move into the enlargement dynamic, the future of the Eastern Partnership is immediately up for redefinition, which then opens up those broader foreign policy and EU as a global actor type questions too. So we have a little bit of time for questions. Great, quite a few already, so please.
Thank you so much for presentation and for quite many questions placed for this panel. I'm trying also to think out loud. Maybe you could also address some things. First one, Politico publication of today mentions that in this document, this report,
which we expect to be voiced tomorrow. There will be a clear invitation for Ukraine and Moldova to open accession negotiations. And for Georgia, for candidate status. As well, there would be there is information that there will be invitation for Bosnia and Herzegovina to open negotiation as well. Keep in mind that we are trying to address fundamentals. What should be civil society position on this issue? Should we somehow try to be loud that, okay, Georgia is still far beyond the progress of fundamentals? Should we also be vocal on Bosnia's track that almost none of the recommendations from the Commission was addressed properly when it comes to fundamentals? So what should be our, as civil society, declaration or manifestation to this issue? Dmitry, you mentioned Eastern policy of European Union. In your position, Central Europe was Ukraine. Could we just be authors of this Eastern policy, just counter to this, I don't know, as it was from French and German position with these reforms of European Union? They produce this paper, they have discussions. Could it be initiative from Central Europe, for example, to just launch this new Eastern policy of European Union? Is it plausible on your side? And maybe should we also have some efforts in this joint combination? Or what's your point on that? I will stop here.
Dmitry, would you like to come back to that already?
I think that would be really good if, Poland and Sweden say they initiated the Eastern Partnership. Well, actually, Czechs also say that they were among the godfathers. Would be good if, I don't know, Ukraine and Poland and other interested governments and civil societies would, think tanks would initiate and suggest some sort of draft for debate for the new vision of Eastern policy of the EU. I think that would be ideal scenario. But it's open question to all of us. I mean, if we think that we'll be able to do it, at least in the short term. I don't know if it's just now in this reality, in these circumstances but let's discuss. I mean, but it's not up to me. I mean, to judge. I think we need to sit down together with colleagues and ask, are we really able to do it? I mean, I remember I totally agree with this statement which was made by Jakub at the last panel, like about these quarrels between Ukrainians and Poles, right? So if we are not able to find a common agreement and common understanding on some small issues, are we able to do it on bigger issues? But actually, maybe in some such issues we are more aligned rather than on this particular business issues. So maybe we will be able to really to do it and focus on our strategic common joint interests. I see there's a potential. Definitely, there is kind of clearly alignment on some basic things. So maybe we can do it if we are bold enough. Thanks.
Thank you, Sergey.
I will rather focus on your first question regarding Georgia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. We just had a conversation with participants of the forum and discussed the situation prior to Riga summit. And I do remember that at that time I was in Riga and I had meetings at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And at that time we were discussing the issue of support to Ukraine and visa facilitation issues and stuff like that. And in my argumentation with Latvians who were hosting the summit, I was trying to explain that it's quite important to support pro-European forces in both Ukraine, Georgia, and the Republic of Moldova, because they definitely need some sort of impetus and to show something to their voters. And the answer from our Latvian colleagues was, we supported the Republic of Moldova, and we have 2 failed alliances for European integration. So it was like, it makes no sense to support those who do not deliver. But finally, we see that the situation in the Republic of Moldova has changed. And we have a definitely pro-European president and no less pro-European majority in the parliament. We have Moldova as a candidate state as well as Ukraine. What would happen if the support to the Republic of Moldova was stalled because of the failed alliances for European integration, because of the period when the Republic of Moldova was captured by Plakhotniuk? Nobody knows for sure, but I think that there are forces in Georgia who still deserve to be supported, and provision them with a candidate status with some additional demands, with more recommendations and steps suggested by the European Commission can give the fruits, can give the result, because it will provide the civil society of Georgia with additional tool of pressure on the government. And it will create this frame of cooperation between the EU and civil society. So that's why I think that Georgia at least deserves something. I cannot tell more about Bosnia and Herzegovina because it's not my area of expertise, unfortunately, but in the case of Georgia, I guess they should be in, of course, with some conditionality. However, they shouldn't be just left aside.
Absolutely, thank you. And we have a question just onto the camera.
Good afternoon, Igor Brylyan, Analyst Detector Media. Thank you very much for very insightful discussion. And actually, I want to ask you about maybe not geographically Central European topic, but it's very important. It's about Armenia and Azerbaijan. And in the middle of December, we've seen the escalation of Karabakh conflict. And at the same time, we've seen this radical move of Armenia towards the West. Armenia ratified Rome Statute. They were joined U.S. exercises, military exercises. And what do you think about the role of EU in this peace-making process in Ukraine and as well in Karabakh?
Who would like to go with an answer to that really tough question? You're the speakers. Dmitry, I'll pass on to you.
On peacemaking in Ukraine, EU has a very big deliverable to make to overpass North Korea in production of artillery shells to supply to Ukraine. This is the role in peacemaking in Ukraine. I mean, actually, by the way, we've been talking so much about resilience, so much about deliverables, but ultimately, we haven't really talked with you about military-industrial cooperation, military-industrial integration. Actually, the topic of the next panel. So that would be very interesting to finally we have started to. But if we talked about it with the European Union before, if the European Union were ready to talk before about it and to do about it, then we'll be more resilient. And yeah, I think that's the biggest role, plus the sanctions. On South Caucasus, maybe you.
Thank you. Although I'm not an expert on South Caucasus as well, I still was trying to follow the appetite for security efforts of the EU in the region. And of course, my interlocutors mostly were the experts, the representatives of civil society. And what I can admit that both experts in Azerbaijan and experts in Armenia insisted that there should be security dimension of the Eastern Partnership. Of course, the interpretations were different, and we were trying to seek for some common denominators. And at least there was a common denominator that the EU can be a provider of human security in the region. If not hard security, which the EU abstained from, and it's okay because we can see that the common security and defense policy is not the best success of the European Union, so it was reasonable to abstain from it. at least from the Brussels perspective. But the EU failed to deliver even these small demands, and therefore, I would say that if the EU was more active in soft security dimensions, in human security dimensions, then probably it could have created some preconditions for peaceful solutions. But as Pope Francis said, who am I to blame the EU?
Thank you. Really difficult but important question, and very difficult to answer. We haven't got any more questions from the audience, I think, so I'm going to just two very, very quick questions. And it kind of relates to what was just said. According to the Eastern Partnership Index, both Azerbaijan and obviously Belarus, but also Armenia as well, have performed a lot worse on human rights issues over the past year or so. So, Dimitro, you said you asked the question about what to do with Azerbaijan if, enlargement proceeds for 3 other countries. So what to do with Azerbaijan if the human rights situation is deteriorating, if the EU needs Azerbaijan because of energy and trade routes, and yet it's going in completely the opposite way to supposed EU values? And for Sergei, another thing that the index has indicated, that when it comes to corruption, judicial issues, accountability, countries often perform much better at the municipal and local levels as opposed to the national levels. Is that your impression too? Maybe Dimitro, Azerbaijan?
Azerbaijan is just, in my view, is just one of the cases of one of many cases. What to do with Saudi Arabia? Also, very poor human rights track record, but very important economic partner of the European Union. What to do with many other countries? I'm not sure that we need to have a common framework for such countries like Ukraine and Moldova on the one hand, and Azerbaijan or Armenia, at least so far, on the other hand. If the countries, or Belarus, if the countries don't want to engage, if the countries don't share the ambition, if the countries don't share the agenda, why should we have one size fit? Okay, even with the most possible differentiation, still it's some sort of framework for countries which are, the only thing we share, we don't even share geography. What we share is just we used to be part of Russian Empire. Okay, there used to be many other countries who used to be parts of other empires. So why not we look at the Western Balkans together with Middle East? We don't have one policy in joining for those countries, but just it's not really the good criteria, I think. Maybe we really need to come back to the issues of what is the. That in some cases we have agendas with some countries who are willing to go on the European path, to approximate, to adapt to Euro norms, and this is one thing. On the other hand, there are countries with whom we European Union has to do basically classic foreign policy, based on security interests, based on economic interest as well, also on values, and very importantly, it's a challenge, of course, for such a situation. But it's it really needs to be calibrated where and how European Union needs to be engaged. So far, my understanding, like last news, what I saw, Azerbaijanis and Armenians meet together in Tehran, with international players being outside players being Russia, Iran, and Turkey, those who discuss peace building or whatever resolution settlement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. EU is not on the table. Is European Union really? Does the European Union want to be at the table? Does the European Union want to have a role? What sort of role? What sort of interest of the European Union to to do. Maybe it's okay if other regional players do it. I mean, or it's not okay. I think there's a kind of, we need to start from the questions: what are the interests of the European Union in this particular region or country, or in this case conflict? How European Union wants to see, what sort of outcome, what sort of perspective according to its own interests, visions, and values.
Yeah, I think at the moment it's
and then to develop policy accordingly.
At the moment dominated by connectivity, energy, trade, I think. Sergei, last words?
Yeah,
cool.
Thank you. While Dmitro was answering your question, I was thinking about mine, and I was trying to find some explanations and to understand why does it happen this way. And I guess I've got few which are not, it's difficult to put them into one basket. But anyway, first, I think that and it's common knowledge and it's generally accepted that the reform of decentralization in Ukraine was a success. So we have this progress in the process of decentralization, which probably had some impact. But also, I would say that to a large extent, it's also the issue of attention and perception. I mean, if we are talking about the future of the country, then the key focus of those who monitor the reforms is on the national level, and because it is the destiny of the state which is being at stake, and therefore, paradoxically, there could be even more problems in municipalities, but they remain unnoticed. And actually, I cannot give you a proper answer if it is a success of the decentralization reform or if it is a lack of attention to the decentralized levels.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure the answer either. But it is noticeable in the index results that there is a kind of more positive, better situations with regards to anti-corruption and accountability, and also equality and representation of women at the local level of government compared to the national. Something to do with that. Okay, so we've actually come around in very good timing, and so we'll close the session and we have a short break, I think.